how does your organization or organizations interact with other ones? So what is the role of coalition building, organizations, and especially thinking about expanding your vision within your community and what is the best fit to a larger, broader vision of it's a bit more global or national.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's a really important question. And I think that the way that we at First for Economic Justice and at Transforming Justice think about a movement, we think that movement building and making a movement means everyone needs to be there, right? It means that we're prioritizing, like Yasmeen talked about, folks at the margin, and we're really centering people with lived experience. So I think that one of the things that we do at First for Economic Justice is really engage in coalitions. And the one that we're doing right now is called the Gender Action Coalition. And it's working with different organizations that have memberships and people in leadership who have formerly received welfare benefits in New York City. And that's really important, particularly trans folks, because at First for Economic Justice, we know that in order to survive, we need our basic needs met. So needs like food, needs like clothing, needs like shelter, needs like housing. And at First for Economic Justice and in the Gender Action Coalition, we're doing a survey project and a documentation project to find out how folks who are trans, folks who are gender variant, folks who are gender nonconforming are running into trans misogyny, transphobia, and a lot of homophobia while accessing benefits at HRA, the housing, the administration that gives welfare benefits. And I think that what's really important for us to know right now is that our folks are accessing benefits while resisting enormous amounts of violence. And in order to respond to that, enormous amounts of violence, in order to respond to that, we need to be bringing folks together. But in order to bring folks together, we need to know what the issues are. You know, who are we talking to? How are we gathering information? That's something that we really are centering.
I mean, I think the larger question of movement building, and Reina was getting at this a little bit, I think is also about really taking an honest look at the conditions that we're looking at right now. We're seeing the recession sort of quickening a process that was already underway where a lot of nonprofits are dying out and are gone, or are shrinking considerably. And one of the things we're talking about at the song is we see the use of still being a nonprofit, but we're trying to shrink the nonprofit while we grow the organization, if that makes sense. And the main mechanism we use for that is membership, right? So as we're moving more and more of the program work and the work, that the new projects and work that's starting in the organization into member-led areas, the staff becomes more and more just the coordinators and the administrative arm really of the organization to help boost member-led work. So I would say in terms of movement building that then what we look at is how are we building coalitions with other groups and organizations that are thinking similarly, and I think that QEJ and FIERCE would both be groups that we would see in that way, really thinking about membership at this critical time, and also thinking about, you know, as Yasmeen was saying, there's literally just too few people that work in nonprofits. And as well as what Amber was saying, where do people enter movements now? What are the entry points? You know what, one of 5 jobs in a nonprofit, you know, or you're in academia, like what are the other places where people can enter? And it's not a movement if there's not opportunities for new leaders to be coming in. It's not building a movement. And I think really this piece Yasmeen was getting on about constant leadership development, that like if we really ask ourselves also at this pivotal time, like what is leadership to us? Is it folks who can get up and give good speeches? Is it people who can give good talks? Like what is actually leadership? And I think when we talk about that at Song, a lot of that is about the ability to inspire and support new leaders. That's who we look at as the leaders in our members, are the ones who are helping just constantly developing other new leaders, as well as the people who are just consistently showing up for the work, the things that need to happen so the work gets done. So I actually think it's really relevant to think about both, you know, what kind of numbers does it take for movement and what are leaders, since leadership development is a term that we hear a lot. And I think we've actually reached a point where nonprofits have promoted, they've really helped, particularly our younger leaders, learned that what it means to be a leader is kind of to be a rock star. And like, it's actually not really that effective, you know, to like learn how to have those particular set of skills. So I think in terms of, to get to your question more, Rory, that like, when we're looking at coalition building, it's sort of less about what organizations are kind of saying, you know, these are the particular politics or how those are rolled out, and much more about looking at, oh wow, it totally makes sense to be talking about shared strategies with QEJ and FIERCE, because we're talking about memberships, we're talking about the conditions, we're talking about how we're building leaders and how we're making change, and I think that's where coalition work can become really powerful. And so one of the interesting things for Song is that some of our members are really, really grouchy about us coming up north in general. We have some pretty hardcore Southern nationalists, so it's really good for the member leaders and the staff, because we have to really justify, like, we gotta really, you know, we gotta say, like, this is why we think we should be part of this coalition, you know, and then we gotta have a couple people come from that group to the South and like eat some food with our members, and our members are like, oh, okay, maybe Reina's okay, yeah, we saw her down for the thing, and you know, like, that's really how it works. So, you know, when it works like that, you have a pretty strong arm of accountability, like, did they eat my food, did they not eat my food? You know, that's like, it's pretty clear, you know, so the criteria is very sophisticated for, you know, how we're thinking about it, but I do think it actually does, you know, it is really important to have a regional base that says, okay, how is this relevant for our lives? And I think that's what we should be asking when we enter in coalitions at this point is, you know, is being part of this coalition as a leader in this organization, is that actually helping people in my membership base? Is it helping our members who we're the most accountable to? And I think the kind of coalitions that will do that are the ones that will bring about, quote unquote, a new queer left through those kind of shared values around movement building and shared plans that come out of that vision.
I just want to add a little bit to what Caitlin was talking about. And I think that sometimes when we imagine coalitions, we're imagining coalitions that are working together on a campaign. And I think that now we're at a point where we're analyzing how nonprofits are shaping our movement. And it's a movement that looks different than 1970, when nonprofits didn't hold leadership in, you know, the queer liberation movement or in the gender self-determination movement. Not thinking about those things as separate. And for us at Queers for Economic Justice, something that we think about is access to resources, right? So how do we, as a coalition, redistribute resources? And right now, you know, one of the things that we're thinking about is through organizing schools. And because we have different relationships with foundations, where, you know, up in the Bronx, one of the organizations we work with, Bronx Community Pride, has a very different kind of relationship with access to resources and foundations and donors. Sharing resources, sharing membership, developing leadership, that's a way to hold coalition. And I think that's something that's really important to us. It looks very different than a campaign around police violence. It looks very different around, than a campaign around marriage, but it's something that's about radical redistribution and about mutual reciprocity. And I think that's a point that I just wanted to